start like 2 minutes. Great.
Hello.
Hi. Good morning
Good morning. How are
and
you?
welcome. Good. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
Thank you for being here, Mindy.
Yeah, I try to make almost all of them, but sometimes I have to wait till the recording comes out because work conflicts and stuff. But yeah,
No,
this one's a really good one. So,
thank you. And we just launched a series of the Compass. If you get a chance, look that information in our website.
okay.
Yes.
What happened? Oh,
Uh,
um, yeah, I will because I try to stay on your guys' website. So, there's always a lot of good information on there. It's just so hard to
yes.
navigate it all. Be I'm a single mom and I work full time at a pretty stressful job. So it's like trying to, with a special needs kid, of course, but
Try to find that best of both words. I get it.
yeah. But
Thank you so much for being here.
well,
Really
thank
appreciate it.
you.
I appreciate each one of you. Thank you for being here. Good morning, Tim. I see you. Welcome.
Hi, Zoubida.
How are you?
Fine, how are you?
I am good. Thank you. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this evening presentation too.
Yes.
The final one, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, without a further ado, I thank you very, very much for being here with us on a Tuesday morning. We are going to start a very, very important topic, as you all may be aware of the mental health and the struggles for our kiddos in the school system. I am Zoubida Pasha. I am an educational support coach at Family Matters. Family Matters is a parent training information center. What we do is support, empower, educate, and inform families to become the best advocate for their kids. Our mission is to provide a toolbox, help you build that toolbox to really pull each tool whenever is needed. We know we can help families in the IEP, but the focus is to provide you with the tools, because at the end of the day, you will be the one in those IEP meetings constantly and regularly. The content of today's presentation, it is developed under the grant of the U.S. Department of Education, but the content does not necessarily represent the policy of the U.S. Department of Education, and you should not assume endorsement by the federal government. We also want you to know that Family Matters, beside our mission of support, empowerment, and advocacy, helping you to advocate, but we are not a legal service agency. We cannot provide any legal advice or legal representation. Information received from Family Matters is intended as a legal advice and should not be used as a substitution for legal advice. So at the end of this presentation, we will issue certificate of attendance if you are requesting it. But let's get into it. And if you don't mind, for me to know the audience, could you kindly tell me if you are a professional in the chat or if you are a parent? So I will have a better idea how to gauge my presentations and my content. Or you can unmute, whichever is good for you. Okay. Hi, Caitlin. Thank you for being here. Great. Very good. Mostly professionals. So you're going to take the information and help your fellow professional. Thank you, Mindy, for being here, parent. Great. All right. Thank you so very much. So mental health and behavioral support for students with disabilities. We are going to really provide you with a guide with practical tools within this guide to help you navigate this conversation should it happen. If you are a professional and you have students with mental health, may have an IEP or may have a 504, this presentation will really give you a platform of information that will help you navigate those aspects with the parent, of course, with the student. Really, the information, it is going to be geared towards a legal foundation, and from there we are going to scaffold into the tools and the information and all of what is necessary for our students to receive free appropriate public education with the mental health condition they may have. So the legal foundation, we all know if a student have a disability that is hindering them, they may qualify for an IEP. So their the legal foundation will be under IDEA, which is the Individual with Disability Education Act, that guarantee and ensure students who are eligible to receive these services a free appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, including those with mental health. They are covered when it affects school performance. If the student does not have that aspect of, the disability affecting the school performance and they just need accommodations, then a 504 will be the protection for this student. And 504 literally is reasonable accommodation for students who may need it. All students may receive some form of accommodation, but for those with mental health, they will need specific accommodations and support. Under Illinois, Part 226, the State Board of Education had really put a lot of effort to add the Illinois Children Mental Health Act, Public Act 19-04 and 95. That is really helping the student to receive additional support, adding to what IDEA or the Rehab Act of 1973 is mandating. This act is going to discuss, we will discuss during this presentation, the SEL, the social emotional learning, and what will it look like for a student with mental health. For the audience, if you need more information, you can check section or Part 226 that will outline the mental health support in the state of Illinois. Beside the Illinois State Board of Education website have a lot of information on mental health, on behavioral support, and school climate. This presentation offers general information, not a legal advice. Eligibility under mental health. Unfortunately, there is not a lot of categories in the IDEA. We have 13 categories. And for the mental health, sometimes schools utilize the ED, the emotional disability, or OHI, other health impairment. And sometimes there are co-occurrences between autism and anxiety, for example, or autism and depression. And sometimes there are instances of co-occurrences between the specific learning disability and mental health, such as anxiety or depression. Under the emotional disability is when the student, this is the eligibility criteria, when the student learning not caused by other factors, difficulty building or keeping relationship, behavior that seems out of place in a normal situation, ongoing happiness, depression, or fear linked to school. Under OHI, it covers ADHD, ADD, anxiety, and depression. And again, this is under IDEA, meaning that the school performance will be impacted by these disabilities. Under the autism spectrum, social emotional challenges are a core feature of the disability. It impacts the student where they are not able to understand those social dynamics and building relation, etc. And sometimes, like my daughter, who is an adult, she has this anxiety that can be built due to change, sudden change, or something happening within the family dynamic. Sometimes just not able to figure out things that she needs to do in her schedule or schoolwork can get her also anxious. So we have to pay attention to those layers. Even though we have the big umbrella of autism, there is, those fine layers of anxiety. We have to really stipulate everything that is impacting the student to access their educational environment. Under the SLD, the specific learning disability, sometimes in my observation, and this is not really a rule, I have noticed that students with this type of disabilities, they get anxious because their learning is impacted with the SLD, and the anxiety sits in. I'm not able to read, or I'm not able to do math or anything of that sort that can cause these type of, disabilities that can be on top of the SLD. Yet the school obligation is to provide and to detect all areas of suspected disability through comprehensive evaluation. Under 504, it is a broader protection for mental health. We don't have specifically a disability category, but rather students when they are struggling, and we know there is, a record, a medical record or clinical record that the parents are sharing with the school, then the school obligation is to provide or create accommodation according to the student's need. The mental health condition commonly covered under 504 are anxiety disorder, depression or mood disorder, ADHD, ADD, PTSD, eating disorder, or OCD, which is the obsessive compulsive disorder. The accommodations that are kind of common, and again, this is not one size fits all, such as extended time. When a student gets anxious, they need a little bit of time to complete their work, whether it is homework or school work or assessment. Breaks during class or testing, reduce workload. That I have the opportunity yesterday to support a family during the meeting, and the workload came up where the father who is responsible of the homework, and he says once he sees more than 5 sheets, he is not doing the work at all. He would not even attempt. And we discuss it, and the teacher, she says, well, I give more than 5 sheets between math and language art and other subjects within the day. I said, but do you put all of those 5 sheets in front of the student? And believe it or not, it took the teacher a minute. She said, I don't think about those things. Logistically, I just kind of have the folder, and at each, conversation, I provide a sheet or two. I said, then it is less than 5 sheets. So the workload is important also when you have a student who is struggling with this type of mental health that will make them anxious, may not be able to attempt to do the work or finish the work, or sometimes even the quality of work can be impacted when there is mental health nuances and there is a demand on the student. Sometimes preferential seatings can be helpful where the teacher is really paying attention to that student, because sometimes body language is helpful to read and to support the student as needed. Access to counseling and quiet, safe places. This is not something easy, I'm saying, but the school, with what is going on nowadays in our society and the mental health that is impacting even babies, they have to make that effort to create these quiet spaces and where students can regroup and kind of collect themselves. Modified attendance policies. There are instances where mental health impact the student and they are not ready. I have many families just recently who had called and they said the bus is in front of the house and my student is not willing to get downstairs and get on the bus. So the discussion become modified attendance policies. This is not very easy to discuss, especially when you have a 504, even under IEP, but it is something to pull to the attention to the school so they can be aware of the struggles of these students who need this modification in attendance. Homeschool communication system, parents are equal partner in the process, especially under the IEP, as IDEA had stipulated in the 5th principle. The communication should be very much effective, clear, and consistent. Why? Because mental health is invisible. And if we don't say something when we read that body language and communicate with the school and vice versa, we may have other problems that we really don't need to add to the conversation. Key difference between IEP and 504. 504 focuses on access and accommodation with general education, does not require specialized instruction. It has really, really fewer procedural steps than the IEP. In other words, there is not a lot of protections under the 504 versus the IEP. IEP will require, beside the accommodation, is the modification and, of course, specialized instructions. I'm just checking the chat just in case I miss anything. Okay. Illinois mental health mandate school provide a lot of supports, including not limited to that act that has been enacted recently. When I say recently, within 3 or 4 years, all schools must implement social emotional learning standard. Staff must receive training. School must have protocols for responding to mental health concerns and crisis. Partnership with community mental health providers are required. Sometimes these clinicians, they can come and train the school personnel. School require that the social workers and psychologists, counselors, nurses must be trained and also available. Some schools, unfortunately, may not have a social worker on a consistent basis, may not have a counselor on a consistent basis. Well, nowadays, again, with the mental health that is taking over, these things are becoming a mandate. Screenings and parent rights. Mental health screening might occur with parental consent. If there are behavioral challenges, there are consistent and there are patterns of those behaviors, parents should be open to discuss screening. To my definition, when I see a pattern and a consistency and intensity, I will just go for an evaluation. If there is any suicide conversations, and this is hard really for parent, for anybody to talk about, we need really suicide screenings and to kind of lay out a preventive measures within that school. Parent must be notified of mental health concerns, and consent is required for most mental health services. The social emotional learning within the state of Illinois, there are 5 cores. We will start with the self-awareness. I can kind of really look at the platform of a human being. If we are not aware of what's going on within, then anything else that we will do may not be successful. Simple as that. So we have to really help the student understand their own emotions, strengths, and areas of growth or areas that they need to really kind of work on. That is the platform, that is the foundation. And then we scaffold how, once you know your emotions or thermometer, that's my very plain parental language with my own daughter when she was in the school system. I asked them, what is her thermometer? Good or average, or she's not ready to work, like which card she's showing you. So if she's showing them the green card, she's good. If she's showing them like, okay, I'm teetering into the yellow, then I need a lot of breaks. Red, I'm just not ready. I just need to sit down and collect my head. So once we really learn these things and help the student to understand themselves and their own emotions, their own strengths, then we will be able to help them self-manage, regulate, and really make sure that we are providing the appropriate support, including not limited to behavioral intervention plans to help the student self-manage and regulate. Then once, we get to that level of self-management, then we have to make the awareness a mission, which we have to help the students show empathy and understand diverse perspective, because sometimes students with mental health Mental health really it's a very unique disability because it masks even the thought process in where the student may not be even aware of their surrounding and what is going on and how that mental health, their mental health is impacting others. So once we help the self-management, we will have to make the effort to be aware of what is surrounding us and be really aware of what is going on with others. So we will have to really know how to navigate those social dynamics. If I am not well and I cannot build a relation or be in a group work, I have to really self-advocate and say, I am not well today and I can't be in this group. But again, with mental health, student may have the difficulty to even identify what is going on with them. Relationship skills is building and maintaining healthy relation through communication and cooperation. Then decision making. And this is really important because sometimes with the behavior, mental health, and all of those comorbidities, our youth may not have what it takes to make those solid decisions when it comes, to school access, building relation, just kind of sometimes just working on a project with peers can be challenging for a student because they are not able to maintain, their emotions, or they are not able to participate or provide, time, understand timeline. I have seen students in high school projects that require group, and those with mental health, they don't really kind of, okay, I'm going to get to it when I get to it. Yeah, you do the work and I'm going to participate. Well, you have to bring your part. You have to do your part to participate in this project as a group. And sometimes deadline, those executive functioning can be also problematic with the mental health. Research linked the SEL to improve academic, fewer behavioral issues, and better mental health outcomes. The social emotional learning goals can be included directly in the student's IEP. And the information can be also found at the Illinois State Board of Education website. There is a variety of information that you can check, but we will also share those links with you after this presentation. Implementing the SEL in the classroom. We have to, again, look at practical tools. We have to start daily practices, check in, check out. We have not only to do the check-ins on the work, but the emotional check-in is the most important thing we have to start with when there are students who are struggling with mental health. Mindfulness and breathing exercise, and that's when those quiet spaces will come in handy. And I'm hoping that the schools will have, the tools and the resources to create these spaces. Conflict resolution circles and gratitude journals. Students who are able to write, journaling, it's very important to help them kind of track those emotions and express themselves. I have seen last week a young woman in the high school, and she expressed herself to her parent and to her team at the school that if she gets that 30 minutes a day to sit and write what she needs to write, it will help her. One of the teachers said, "You cutting into my block. Why are you choosing my block?" And I was kind of listening to the conversation very carefully. And I said, do you hear the student advocating for themselves very appropriately? You can really provide that, whatever that 30 minutes miss from that instruction, in another format to help this student get through her day if she need that writing of that journal. And this student really have a specific style where during that particular block, unfortunately, she says, this is the time that I feel my brain need to stop, pause, and I need to write. And I said to the parent, you may have to really kind of request another schedule if it is possible. We are in February. It was last week, February. I don't know how the schedule will be modified within the school, but we are really working with this situation here. I am sharing some of the concrete examples, and I'm also sharing my lived experiences with my daughter, if you don't mind. The SEL across the curriculum that can be implemented in the curriculum. We have to make the effort to talk about emotions and all of that in a text, for example, in reading lesson or language art. We can also embed all of this in science lessons to really make it known how the stress can impact the brain. We also can make it very artsy in art and music to express emotions and whatnot. This will really require a universal design learning, UDL, and creativity. Of course, teachers have a set of lessons that they need to provide and prepare in accordance of the Common Core and what is the school policy. But when you have a student with mental health and they have an IEP, the IEP itself, it has the individualization as is. The third one is the supportive environment, visual support, charts, calm down corners, clear expectation, and consistent routine with the mental health and the behavioral support. One word that stood up to me all of these years working as a support or advocate or whatever I have done in terms of supporting families is consistency. And that word never changed. And if it does change, the outcomes are not great. Positive reinforcement, that is also crucial when you have a student with mental health. In implementing any behavioral support or any SEL, the positive reinforcement will have a greater impact and outcome on the student. Measuring the progress, of course, if you have an IEP, you are going to measure the progress. There is no difference when you have the SELs implemented in the IEP. Then we have to do progress monitoring and we have to make sure we document, take notes and data, etc. We also have to consider rating scales. Why? It will give us a lot of information on what is provided and to tell us if it is working or not working. Positive behavioral intervention and support. The PBIS is an evidence-based framework focused on teaching and reinforcing positive behavior. It's not really the replacement here, it's the prevention. We are working on preventing those behaviors to occur. How? Is to teach and build those skills. And again, this is including those SELs that we just talked about. We have to acknowledge what's going on. Then we have to really help the student self-manage, self-regulate, and so forth. This is really a collaborative effort from a framework, from SEL, from a lot of things that will help the student. I wouldn't say overcome, but outcomes be much better when we really pay attention to these frameworks, to these strategies and interventions. The PBIS framework focuses on 3 tiers. The first tier is for all students. Most of the schools now, they are working on all students and they are really teaching the positive reinforcement system. There is consistency and there is really expectation that we teach the students throughout the day. Be respectful, be positive, do your work, be on time, etc. This is kind of like a rule that they are really engaging the students to understand under this tier 1 is for all students with or without disabilities. Tier 2 would require a little bit more intensive support, with a little bit more support than the tier 1, meaning that we will really provide the support in a small group. We have to do regular check-in, check-out. We have to do social skill group and mentoring. This kind of target 10 to 15% of the student body when a school with a school district. When we need more support for a student, then we are going to consider tier 3, which really will intensify the support beside what tier 2 is stipulating. We will add functional behavior assessment. We have a behavior intervention plan, and we have to have a crisis intervention services within the plan. PBIS aligned directly with IDEA focuses on positive intervention. Illinois school implement PBIS as part of the MTSS system. So you have the MTSS is the umbrella, and then the PBIS is under that umbrella. MTSS, of course, it has also the tiers, tier 1, tier 2, 3. So PBIS really fall under that umbrella, and each tier have the levels of support. Remember, tier 1 is for all students with or without disabilities. Tier 2 can be for students with or without disabilities, but it will be very much in small groups. Those are specific students who may be at risk. Then tier 3, it may be students who may have a 504 or an IEP. Mental health services in school. I am pausing here because when we talk about the services within the school, we all the time kind of think directly at social work or anything of that sort. It is not only the social work who can be the core of these services, but rather it is counseling, group counseling, psychological services, of course, the social work, because they connect families to resources. Then in crisis interventionists, and these are really specific people who may have those trainings and skills to intervene when there are crises and whatnot. For counseling, it is really based on the student need. It is typically one-on-one sessions where the student is seeking help from that person who can guide them, for whatever that problem that they are, encountering for that day or for that semester or anything of that sort. Counseling in school districts, sometimes they provide those academic, guidance, but they do have that component of helping students to manage their emotions, grief, anxiety, and building relations and whatnot. How to access, make sure if you are a parent and if you are a professional helping parent is to really request evaluation when the mental health again is adversely impacting the student to access their educational environment. Mental health personnel, who are they? They are school psychologists, school social workers, counselors, and behavioral specialists. School psychologists, really, they are critically important in the process of evaluation because they will really dissect the need of the student, utilizing multiple tools to really understand not only the needs, but also the strengths. Students who have disabilities, mental health or otherwise, they do have strengths. We just sometimes don't think about it. These psychologists will have to utilize these tools through these evaluation comprehensively to understand the need. They also will be leading the team to provide crisis intervention, develop minor intervention plan, and analyze school-wide behavioral data. School social workers, they are really licensed professionals who work with students and the families. They have dual role. They work directly with the student and they also work with the family to provide the resources and help the families to be connected to clinics, resources in the community, and so forth. And also they facilitate communication between home and school. Counselors, they provide support for students who may need guidance on an academic planning, career guidance, social emotional skill development. If there is a conflict and the students are in the counselor's office, they will receive that really guidance on how to develop skills. Next time, we don't have to really have all of this bickering and all of these problems. So they will have to create a plan for the student to navigate this aspect of conversations. And of course, crisis response and intervention. Behavioral specialists, when they conduct, these are professionals who conduct the FBAs, the functional behavior assessment, develop the plans, the behavior intervention plan, train staff on behavioral strategies, and really collect, analyze the data. Trauma-informed practices in school. Many students may experience trauma. I have the opportunity to work with a number of students in the city of Chicago, within Chicago Public School, and they really, really have this trauma. Just kind of what you're hearing, what's going on, not only in the city, but, even in the suburb or in the United States or in the world. A lot of violence is happening and it is impacting our youth. Some of the students who may be walking in the neighborhood, they have these really trauma because they hurt somebody they know have been, impacted with gun violence, or even their family members. Then school obligation is to provide this trauma-informed trainings and support for students. When a student is really experiencing trauma, it is very much different. Very, very different. Any trigger can really wake up that trauma and they can really experience that PTSD. So the school training should look like in realizing what's going on and understanding trauma that is affecting the learning and the student in different ways and in real ways. Because sometimes I've heard these statements and I'm quoting, "Oh, snap out of it, get out of it. I know you're just doing that to get attention." Sometimes students who have mental health, they don't do these things to seek attention. It is something that they are not able to control. Then the school have to really learn how to identify sign of trauma, is recognizing it. It is withdrawal, hypervigilance, aggression, and sometimes difficulty with concentration. School, they have to respond to trauma, which they have to be trained and they have to have those practices readily to really help the student navigate those aspects of trauma when trauma happen. So they have to really make sure there are routines, safe space, strong relationship. All the time when there is a peer professional, I ask the parent, how is your peer professional with your child? If they are dedicated. And sometimes I hear, I don't know. Well, you may have to ask your child if they are able to respond, or you may have to kind of probe and ask the paraprofessional to see if there is any report and any relationship. Why? If there is trauma, if there is mental health, report and relationship are very important because that student will trust that person and they may kind of talk to them and kind of feel comfortable to express themselves to that person. Then resist the re-traumatization, which avoid discipline practice. If a person or student is experiencing trauma and you are against and you are really, really utilizing that power struggle, you are enhancing that PTSD. You are not diffusing or de-escalating the situation, but rather you are escalating it. So the training really have to be re-traumatization strategies where have to be avoiding the discipline. When you see a student who is really struggling with trauma, this student should not leave that classroom in punishment, but rather if you need a break, something that is positively reinforced. You need a break. You need to collect your head. But not, no, sit in that corner. I am asking you to do the work. I am the teacher. I am leading this classroom. That can really escalate the situation. Trauma-informed classroom strategies include offering choices, building trust, using strength-based language, and avoiding punitive discipline. Schools should also provide trainings to staff. This is not going to come just like that for staff, but rather with training and self-care, because the burnout when you have a student with mental health is real. So school really have to have strategies to avoid those burnout and help the staff to recollect themselves so they can do a very good job to help the student. Key federal guidance through the Office of Special Education Program, utilizing Dear Colleague letter, the DCLs, to provide more guidance in this regard. In 2022, there were DCLs that had been provided, providing guidance on prioritizing positive reinforcement in PBIS framework within the IEP. required considering mental health in a functional behavior assessment, utilizing those rating scales to make sure we are not missing anything of that mental health aspect, because mental health is a big umbrella. It can show you the anxiety, but under the anxiety there is depression, or under the depression there is anxiety, and so forth. Reinforce that mental health services qualified as related services under IDEA, so they can access the social emotional learning through social work and counseling. Clarifying the COVID, which, there are side effects of those who have been impacted with COVID, and guide the use of American Rescue Plan funds for school mental health. So this is really for internal uses. The two bullet points in this box is for the school. Letters on restraint and seclusion, the guidance again through the DCL or Dear Colleague letter, it prohibits mechanical restraint and locked seclusion for students with disabilities. Restraint must be only used when there is an immediate and imminent danger. Require immediate parent notification and written documentation of incident. Highlight harm to students with trauma, anxiety, or emotional disability. This is a lot of work, and it requires a lot of documentation and data tracking. These are the takeaways that the federal letters confirm that addressing the child mental health needs is not optional. It's rather a mandate, and it is a legal obligation under IDEA and under 504, Rehab Act of 1973. I'm going to pause for a minute to see if there are any questions. If you did not write your questions, can you tell me what are your questions and mute?
Hi, this
Sure.
is Mindy. I
Yes,
just
Mindy.
have a question. My daughter has like an attachment disorder and PTSD and among other things, along with, ASD and hearing loss. But anyway, my question is like with these behavioral things, when she's refusing to go to school on some days, like it's every once in a while, but she like refuses, like to the point that like we'll run to the back of the van and I have to pull her out of the van and then I'm dragging her in. And as I turn around, she tries to run after me. And like, like on days like that, like I would rather just let her stay home. But the school puts so much pressure on attendance that they're saying that that's the reason her grades are falling. And like, how do I navigate that? Like maybe she just needs to stay home another hour and then we take her in later. I've asked for a behavioral intervention plan because she has had suicidal ideation and been denied. So uh, we're in the process right now. They're like monitoring it, but they're also giving her breaks that have been required since the beginning in her IEP that they weren't giving her. So now, her behavior is going to look a little different because now they're actually giving her the breaks during this time we were monitoring. It's just a whole thing. But I don't know about the school. Like, I don't like that of forcing her to go in the morning when she's that dysregulated and then has to mask when she gets to class that everything's okay. Because I know that's what happens.
Thank you so much, Mindy, for sharing this. You are really right on point. I am in the process of supporting families like yours. My thought processing with what you are asking can be two things. School refusal is a behavior, even though it may sound kind of behavior is all the time sounding negative, but it's not, can be addressed with a functional behavior assessment to understand why she's refusing to go to school. You can also utilize that mental health children act, because there are days that they don't have to attend school, and it can be under that umbrella and it will be excused and with the provision of what you need to work on. The other thing, because if it is consistent, you don't want her to get in the gist of not going to school and utilizing, that mental health children act as a recourse. We don't want our children to kind of get used to that mode. They need to go to school, do the work, etc. Then the other thing is the modified attendance policy that can be accommodated, especially if there is mental health disability documented in her IEP. If it is not, that's the start. You have to start there so they can understand her needs. So I am hearing the attendance school refusal. So in my mind, it will be a functional behavior assessment with intervention, positively reinforced. Of course, accommodation of breaks. And throughout the day, positive reinforcement should be provided without a question. But if it is a long-term school refusal, as she's going to get older, now you may be able to, hold her hand or physically kind of like carry her inside the school. When she get older, taller than you, then what? We have to really understand these layers with our students so they can start building a plan that will be addressing her specific need. If school refusal, because I am tired, mentally tired, I'm not able to do the work, then modifying the work can be a conversation. Frequent, consistent structure breaks, giving her a quiet space where she can collect her head. And these can go through the accommodations and also the goals as well as the behavior intervention plan. Beside your request for attendance, modifying the attendance policies if it is possible. I know schools may not be that flexible and they don't want to make flexibility only for this, and other parent may get mad. Kind of tackle it from different angles. I would be more than happy to support you directly, Mindy. I will put my information and we can kind of go over the IEP and kind of pinpoint to what is needed in her IEP as addition. Does she receive any SELs, social emotional learning? Does she have any goals? And what are they working on? Because school refusal can also have that component of decision making. Is that also addressed through her IEP?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I would love to chat with you more
Okay.
about it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Not a problem. I hope I had given you some answer, but I will be very happy to work with you one-on-one. Thank you so much for asking this question. It's a very good question. Any other
Thank you.
questions or comments? I'm not hearing none. Okay, my email is in the chat. Promising practices in school mental health, the evidence-based approaches, they are now the talk and all of that. This evidence-based approach without fidelity, it is not going to work. When we provide these supports, we really, really have to put a lot of effort in tracking and progress monitoring to see if these practices are addressing the needs of the student or not. Trauma-informed care, which is the TIC, safe environment that account for trauma impact. The MTSS, which is really a layered academic, behavioral, and social emotional support, is an umbrella, big, huge umbrella. Underneath that umbrella, there is the PBIS model. This restorative justice, which we repair the harm and rebuilding community instead of punitive responses. Many of our kids with mental health, they may face juvenile justice. And fortunately, it's a very hard system, and to really expunge those records, it is an act of God. So here, it's not only going to require knowing your right as a parent if you have an IEP and knowing the safeguard under the 504, but rather an act of advocacy at a larger scale to change policy within the system. Because when you have a student with mental health and they are not able to regulate, et cetera, or a student with trauma and they did not receive what they need and they are into that pipeline of JJ, it really require an education for all parties who are involved. We have been involved with this with this research years ago when I was working with the other organization in Chicago. And the data we had collected is stunning. It's mind-boggling, where a parole officer does not even know if there is an IEP within that case or not. And if there is none, that mission will be like asking the school, the alternative school, to start evaluation. Why that was not happening. So here, it's a lot of work, but again, it's doable if we are doing all of these evidence-based approaches with fidelity and tracking. Mindfulness program, techniques of breathings, meditations, and helping the student to really understand their emotion. It's really important, and that's, again, that I start with that foundation. It's a foundation. I start from there. Peer support and mentoring. There are programs not available in every place in the state of Illinois, but there are programs like After School Matters, where students, they mingle with each other, they support each other. See whatever is available in your own community and see what you can work with. Technology and innovation, there are apps that help, but I'd be a little bit careful with the technology because it has pros and it has cons. Telehealth, behavioral data tracking, early warning system, and therapeutic classroom. This kind of not saying we are shuffling the student with mental health in smaller classroom and not considering the least restrictive environment, but we are here talking about meeting the need of the students who are struggling with mental health. That's what this bullet point here is talking about. Essential question for IEP meeting. When a parent is dealing with mental health and IEPs and whatnot, IEPs as is, it's a lot. Then you add the mental health. Sometimes we parents don't see those layers within our children. And if we take them to clinicians and there is a lot of talk, you are dealing with clinical conversation, you have to deal with the IEP. But there are really obligations from the parent side where they have to ask key questions. How does my child mental health affect their academic or social life? How does that anxiety, depression, or that condition is showing? This is what does it look like in my home? And when they come from school or in the weekend or during the holidays or in a family function or holiday function, etc. Then what about services and support? What mental health services is my child going to receive and how often? And how will counseling goals will be measured and tracked? These are really kind of random questions that we put out here to help and prompt the parent to think about their own questions based on their children's need. About behavior intervention, has a functional behavioral assessment done? Was it completed? What are the findings? When are we going to meet to discuss the intervention? About communication, and again, communication is crucial, important, all of the above when you have this mental health tied to the IEP supports, etc. Why? Because if you have a student who have those moments of shutdown or PTSD and don't want to talk about nothing, you need to know from the school, and also if it happened at home, you have to let them know that the student have a moment, did not sleep, etc., whatever those things. If there is medication involved and there are side effects of those medications that will be helping the student with their mental health condition, make sure you track that and you document that in the IEP as well. IEP versus 504, and for those with mental health, we sometimes wonder which one is the right one. Well, IEP is very clear when we talk about IEP is when the academic performance is impacted by that mental health. It requires comprehensive evaluation utilizing different tools and also considering the cultural aspect of the student. It requires also specialized instruction, counseling, social work, behavioral support, accommodation, etc. Student will need an individualized academic instruction or intensive therapeutic services. And their 504, when there is a mental or physical condition that is significantly limiting a major life activity such as concentration, learning, communication, accommodation are put in place, but no goals, unfortunately, There is tracking, there is data, there is benchmarking and progress monitoring with the 504, but there is no goal per se that I am pinpointing to this goal. I'm going to follow through to see if it is working or not working. 504 does not give you a lot of safeguards and protection versus the IEP. IEP is under a federal law, and this federal law is robust and given the protection not only to the student but to the parent. 504 gives you some protection, but it is not as robust as the IEP. A lot of barriers families face when they have a child with mental health. As we all know, the stigma with disability as a whole, but with the mental health specifically, the stigma can look like into the conversation about mental health will become discipline and behavior. And that sometimes is hard to differentiate in conversation where the school is literally focused and anchored behavior. The parent is the mental health that is causing those aspects. Documentation sometimes is very hard to keep track with documentation, but IDEA, that's one of the things that IDEA give the parent is documentation, is to provide evaluation at no cost to the parent when the disability is suspected. And the 504, it does not, unfortunately. There is no cost to, the 504 accommodation, but it does not give you those protection and those safeguards. Limitation in resources, unfortunately, like I had stated earlier in this presentation, some school may not have a social worker on staff that is present, knowing that the mental health now is taking over our youth and our students. A lot of schools, they don't have the social workers staffed every day. They may come once a week, twice a week at the best. Very few schools I have seen who may have a social worker. Few. Really, I can count on both hands. Then there is the shortage of staff, and there is the training that may be lacking for the staff. Many educators lack training, especially in the TIC, the trauma-informed care. These really have to be discussed among, the professionals within the schools, and they have to really take time to get these trainings and understand these best practices. Then when a student is struggling with those aspects of trauma or mental health, the staff are equipped with training and knowledge how to handle those situations. When school resists evaluation, parents have the right to submit written requests. Be specific on the concerns that you have about your child with mental health. Know your rights and really call us to help you understand your procedural safeguard and make sure you understand prior written notice. What does it mean when a school says no? They have to provide you an explanation to why they're saying no, and that is prior written notice. Bullying and disability. We all know within the disability community, bullying is something that is happening. It is unfortunate. But there are really protections for students who are facing bullying. Illinois law requires all schools to have anti-bullying policies. Request a policy from your school, from the principal, from the district. Students with disabilities have dual protection under state and federal law. So you have the federal law if you have the IEP, but you also add the state safeguards when there is bullying conversation. Disability-based bullying is considered as harassment under 504 or IDEA. School must promptly investigate disability-related complaints. Both disciplinary action under the IEP or 504 modification may be required when there is bullying. Warning sign when targeting disability. For example, some students, they really bully each other, the way they look, the way they speak, or they have a device, etc. Exclusion from activities because of disability. If you see these patterns, speak up and do something about it. Verbal harassment about special education services, physical aggression that exploit a student vulnerability and their challenges. Cyberbullying is really one of the hardest that I have to really work with families who have these cyberbullying instances, because the cyberbully may not be known. They may not put their real picture, their real name. Then you have a bigger problem because you don't know who is bullying your child online. But there are safeguards when this is happening. Student documentation, report to the school in writing, file a complaint with ISB or the OCR. Make sure you have a screenshot of those social media if you see those bullying happening on those platforms. Students with disabilities are a higher risk online because sometimes they may not understand a lot of safety measures within those platforms, may have difficulty recognizing unsafe interaction. Schools must address cyberbullying that affects school attendance or performance. If based on disability, it may violate the 504 or the ADA guidelines. Responding to cyberbullying, you have to report it in writing. For sure, you have to request a team review to the IEP and 504 and immediately implement some measures of safety. I call that a safety plan. And you have to discuss what are the tools that the student need to learn how to understand those platforms and dissect the safety patterns within those platforms. The documentation is crucial again. If you really having an issue of resolving it on the level of the school, then you have the right to file a complaint, pursue the file complaint through the OCR, or if there is an IEP, you may seek those complaints through the State Board of Education. But again, documentation is crucial to prove these issues. The evaluation process within the mental health aspect is not different from any evaluation that we had covered, especially those who had attended our training in the past. If the parent really concerned about their child having mental health, or if they have documentation from a clinical team or medical team, then the parent can request an evaluation, the language that can be helpful, comprehensive evaluation, looking into all areas of suspected disability. The school obligation is to provide a response within 14 days. If the school is willing to move with an evaluation, then a domain meeting will happen. And in that domain, then the parent and the team within the school should discuss all areas that will be kind of hindering the child or the student to access their educational environment. Now, if you have a student who have ADHD, a lot of times school does not look into the cognitive. And sometimes when we kind of help the parent to navigate this aspect of conversation, we get the feedback of cognitive, oh, they are fine, they are able to, they don't have a low IQ. Well, if you have a student who have these challenges with the ADHD, the executive functioning is not okay. And that's part of the cognitive. So then we are looking into what are the tools for that aspect of executive function in the organization, the inhibition, the engagement, and really the memory, how those memory indexes, what is the adaptive skills for that student. So we have to look at all areas. If the psychologist is present in that domain, please ask key questions if you have students who may have challenges with the ADHD, executive functioning, or any nuance of attention. Then once the reports are completed within 60 school days, the team will meet to discuss the eligibility. They will review the data and dissect those reports to understand the impact of the disability. If there is an impact on the student in the school performance, then an IEP is the conversation, is the eligibility. If it is not, then the 504 will be the eligibility for that student. Always request evaluation in writing. Keep copies, keep documentation. If the school denied the request, they have to provide you with a prior written notice, meaning they have to tell you why they are denying. You have the right to request an independent evaluation at public expense. If you disagree with the evaluation outcome that the school had conducted, however, it has a caveat, and the caveat is the school can due process you if they refuse. So there is a layer of information that you need to know about the IEE. Parents have the right to conduct an independent evaluation at all time, and I call that a second opinion. If you really have a kind of second thought about something that the school did not do, out of pocket, you can do your own evaluation, but the school can only consider. You can tell the school, I have done evaluation on my own, or you don't have to. But if it is going to benefit the student, I will share that information with the stipulation that the school will consider and turn that consideration into action of support and services. What comprehensive mental health evaluation includes? Reviewing the record and previous evaluation. Parent are equal partner in this process. Parent will provide meaningful input when there is mental health specifically, because they will tell the school on what is observed in the home, setting, etc. Teacher observation, classroom observation, student interview, if it is appropriate and if they are able to articulate, reviewing most work sample and academic performance. Key assessment area: cognitive and academic functioning, social, emotional, and behavioral, attention and executive functioning, adaptive behavior, and living skill, daily living skills. Mental health specific assessment, focusing on the BASC, like, the behavioral rating scales, and the corners. These are just names that we put out there to give you an idea how to look for tools. This is not really what we recommend. We cannot recommend any tools because we are not evaluators. We are here to support you, but you can ask, what are the tools that you are going to utilize for the evaluation pertaining to A, B, or C? For depression and anxiety screening tools. Now, when I hear screening, I want to make sure that I mention screening are not comprehensive. They are short, very short questionnaires. That's what screening is all about. It does not really dig deeper. If you really have serious concerns, you have to ask for comprehensive evaluation utilizing different tools. Trauma assessment when appropriate, functional behavior assessment. If there is any suicidal ideology, then the risk assessment is needed. Timeline: 60 school days in Illinois, and parent must provide informed consent for the evaluation to be completed. Parent may request, these are your rights if you are a parent, to request an IEE, but I had explained it has the caveat of due process if the school refuses. Mental health support in the IEP best practice is the counseling under IDEA, as we have seen in the Dear Colleague letter. The counseling, the PBIS framework are really becoming something that need to be discussed during the IEP. The social emotional learning goals, and there is tons and tons of information on the State Board of Education about the SEL, the accommodation for mental health, such as modifying the assignment during stress, extending the time, accessing to safe or quiet room, schedule check-in with a trusted staff member, visual support in advance or advance notice, preferential seating if it is needed. You as a parent would know what would work best for your child to meet their need. And of course, in collaboration with the teachers and the school staff. These are examples of goals on a social emotional that you can read on your own. I'm not going to really read them for you. We will share with you the PowerPoint, and you will have an idea what a social emotional will look like, learning can look like. We all the time keep in mind the goals at any level in the IEP should be SMART, specific, targeting that area of deficit, measurable, where we have to measure the support, and attainable, where we have to make sure we are providing the support and outlining the methodology of the support. R is for relevant, to the need of the student and timeline. We have to put a time on those goals. Accommodation and modification. Sometimes we hear staff in the school saying both, accommodations and modification. When you have an IEP, yes, they go both hand in hand. When you have a 504, it's only accommodation. But they are different. They go together, but they are different. Different how? Accommodation will change the how, the environment of how the student learn, versus modification is what changing what the student will learn, which is the content. Accommodation is a change of the environment or something that will help the student to access their environment, such as extended time on testing, breaks, extended time on classroom work, fidget, visuals, schedule and timers, alternate testing location, advance notice of transition, communication, notebook with school. Modification will be reducing the number of test questions, simplifying the reading, the reading material. Alternative assignments versus, giving a whole chapter, we have to give a couple of pages. Different grading criteria. There is the standard grading scales and there is the modified grading scale. So modification can consider a modified grading scales where the B is an A and etc. Adjusting performance expectation, where we are not saying here tapping into the quality of instruction, is the quantity of the instruction. We really kind of look into shrinking a little bit that content for the student to access it when they are struggling, especially if the anxiety sits in and they just like the student that I am supporting the family now, they sees 5 pages and they are not even attempting. I'm not doing that work at any rate, whether it is school or home specifically. With the mental health, we all the time kind of talk about the mental health that can come with some behavioral challenges. Then school obligation is to conduct an FBA or functional behavior assessment to understand and to really dissect the function of that behavior. The functional behavior will really work in a lot of steps. We have to identify the behavior. We really have to make sure we have a definition of that behavior that is clear, measurable, and observable. We have to collect data and we have to utilize different method of collecting the data. We have to really now come up with a hypothesis to say, oh, we are determining now the function, and now we are going to develop the hypothesis. The mental health context matter. Always consider a student mental health diagnosis in an FBA. A student with anxiety who leave class may be escaping overwhelming stimuli, not being defiant. When a student really having a moment of PTSD, for example, during the FBA, we have to consider, we have to note and make a note of that PTSD during the FBA process. Then once we collect the data and we identify the function of the behavior, then we are going to discuss the intervention. We have to outline the prevention strategies that change what trigger the problem behavior. We have to make a change to the environment. We have to make adjustment to the environment. For example, provide visual aid. We have to really help the student adapt to a routine, advance warning, sensory support and input if the student is in need of. Then we have to teach and reinforce the behavior by those strategies to replace the behavior. This require breaks, using help card, deep reading, requesting attention appropriately, raising hand, for example, instead of just self-talking and blurring, loud words. Reinforcement of these intervention or systems is reward positive behavior with praise, token, preferred activities, or choice. Reward may match the function of the behavior. If the student is just really in need of attention, we can just be close to the student and give them, that nod and tell them, I hear you, I see you, what do you need? Those are things that be helpful. Response to strategies, staff really protocol for when the problem behavior occur. Plan, ignoring for attention seeking, granting breaks, requests, de-escalation techniques, and crisis protocol. With each behavior intervention plan, what I have noticed for the last 2 or 3 years, I am seeing a lot of time the crisis plan attached to it. We used to call it safety plan, now they call it crisis plan. The BIP and the FBA, just like the evaluation, it has to be culturally sensitive, and the school have to have that aspect of cultural responsiveness during this process. That will include also the language and the culture of that student. Make sure you talk to the parent to really understand the layers of the student that you have in your class. Students who have mental health, they sometimes face discipline, and they are not exempt from discipline, unfortunately. Except with students who have IEP and disability, there is something that is called manifestation determination. This will be helping the student and protect the student from unfair discipline. We have to look at the action. Was it caused, and was it directly and substantially linked to the disability? And if the answer is yes, then we are going to provide additional support. There will be no change of placement. If the school failed to provide the support according to the IEP, there is no brainer there. Then the school have to address the situation by compensating the student of what they had lost in support and services. This data here, it gives you the high rate of suspension of our students with emotional disabilities versus other disabilities, which is very unfortunate. Crisis intervention and safety plan, we have to have immediate response, risk assessment, parent involvement and notification is crucial, and follow-up. We have to meet with the parent regularly. Again, one word that is standing in my head all the time, staying in my head, I should say, is consistency. When there is suicide conversation, which is very, very uncomfortable for some parents, but still we have to take preventive measures. We have to make sure we have some tools, and we have to really have a plan to make sure that the student is protected and having all the support necessary. Some of the signs that really can give us a nuance of this ideology is when they are feeling like a burden, when they are in hopelessness, when they are increasing withdrawal, when there is dramatic change in sleeping behavior or eating, increase of use of drugs, etc., then we have to make immediate response, and we have to have a protocol. When we hear a student saying something that they want to die, we don't leave that student alone. We have to stay calm and listen without judgment. We don't take the threats. We have to take the threats seriously and never minimize. Nothing is big, nothing is small. We have to pay close attention when there is this conversation. Again, it is very uncomfortable for a lot of parents. We have to make sure if the parent hears these things and sees these things at home, you have to notify the school. Notify mental health professional immediately. Seek help. Conduct suicide risk assessment. Develop a safety plan. These are obligations. Advocating for your child with mental health in the IEP. You have to be prepared at any meeting. For mental health, when you have a mental health diagnosis or disability documented in the IEP, it is no different. You have to track, you have to document, you have to attend the meeting, and you have to know your right. Your right is to disagree and keep everything documented and escalate if you need to. You don't have to agree to everything that the school tell you, because you are the expert on your child. You know your child best. You will advocate by being informed and educated on your rights. This is an IEP checklist for you to, if you are a parent and if you are a professional, please share with the parent. Make sure they have all documentation, review the previous IEP, be prepared with a question list and a parental input statement to help guide that conversation and help guide the training, the IEP. These are takeaways from today's session. Social emotional learning is important. PBIS framework is very important in implementation with fidelity. FBAs or BIPs are powerful. Mental health education right under IDEA and 504, we had really looked at what IDEA is doing nowadays with the DCLs, the Dear Colleague letter, in terms of protecting students with mental health more and more. In addition to what IDEA is stipulating, there are safeguards from the State Board of Education that we will share with you. We really want to emphasize you are an equal partner. You are a key partner that you will have a meaningful input during this conversation, IEPs, and so forth. These are resources that we will share with you. I have the opportunity to work with many clinicians from NAMI, really help families to seek help from this organization. They have chapters and they have different locations in Illinois. If you look at Illinois NAMI, you will see different information in different locations. National mental health crisis resources. These are really kind of resources we're sharing with you that you can share if you are a professional. If you are a parent, please share with your school to make sure they have all the tools. Students who have mental health and have an IEP, they would have a transition plan at 14 and a half in Illinois. With mental health, transition as a movement from one area or one school to the other or one level to the other is very hard and it's very difficult. With mental health, the school have to equip the student with a lot of tools to understand what is ahead. Because this transition is to equip the student with all the tools necessary when they exit the school system and the IEP services will cease. Then what the student should do? Well, one thing is to self-advocate. Then one thing that I really help the parent, make sure your child advocate for themselves. Make sure your child understands self-determination and achieving my goal, etc. In the transition plan, the parent can emphasize the mental health support needed during this transition. Make sure that the student's voice and preference and strength is documented. As a matter of fact, in transition, really the parent input is important, but everything is centered around the student, their voice, their preference, what they want to do, what they are about in the future. The coordination between the outside agencies and the school can be a little bit hard, but the parents have to make sure they have all of the information necessary to make that linkage between school and the other agencies. They call that the interagency in transition, and to make sure you know who should come to your child IEP. Well, we have the Department of Rehabilitation in Illinois. If your child have mental health and they have a developmental disability, then we can have the IACs come into the meeting if they are available. Self-advocacy and students with mental health, empower your student to speak up for themselves, make sure that they are aware, self-awareness, self-regulation, communication skills, and knowing their rights. In communication skills, make sure that they are clear what they are looking for, what they are asking, because sometimes that comorbidity of disability, if they have a learning disability with the mental health and then executive functioning, they may not be clear. Make sure that these things are discussed in their IEP, so the school obligation is to really teach these skills and so forth. Another challenge in the mental health world and disability, the LGBT plus community are really facing more challenges than anybody else. The school play a critical role in creating an environment where every student should feel safe, seen, and supported. Mental health disparity for this population or for this community, especially the transgender and non-binary student, face significantly higher rate of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and self-harm and eating disorders because they feel discrimination, the bullying, the family rejection. And if the family is not rejecting, then the community where they are may be rejecting them. The school have to really build robust tools and safeguard for these students. The mental health impact from discrimination may qualify for services, ensure all staff use the student correct name and pronoun, address the bullying and the harassment, connect with the LGBTQ plus affirming mental health providers and resources. And that's when the school social worker will come, in the rescue, if I can say that, training, awareness, and above all, settling down with the information and talking about it, because sometimes just masking it and shutting it down, it is not going to have a great outcome for the LGBTQ plus student with the mental health. Balancing student privacy and family communication. Some families may not be accepting. Balance student privacy with the parent right. Prioritize student safety. Connect the student with the supported and trusted adult. Know your mandatory reporting obligation, especially when there is suicidal ideation. You really have to be careful as a professional how to navigate this aspect of conversations. Restraint and seclusion, as we all know, with the student who are struggling with mental health or having these behavioral, challenges. Restraint and seclusion, they are not allowed unless if there is an imminent harm and danger. There is strict prohibition. This is one of the pros. The face down, mechanical and chemical restraint are never permitted. Lock seclusion is also prohibited. These methods may never be used for discipline, convenience, or retaliation. Yes, student may have a moment. That's why there is a crisis plan. That's why there are best practices. That's why there are many supports and tools put in place. To put a student away and lock them somewhere, that's not allowed. Emergency use only, that's when it's the last resort. That's when we can use the restraint. However, you have to immediately notify the parent, and you have to document what led to that restraint. Documentation and reporting the incident must be continuously monitored, ended as soon as the danger passes, and documentation within the 24 hours. Staff and student debriefs are required. Parent notification and IEP review and revision are very crucial. As a matter of fact, if there is no FBA, this is really the time to really talk about the functional behavior assessment and behavior intervention plan. If there isn't any crisis plan in the behavior intervention, then this is the time to put one in place. With that, I am done with the presentation. I hope that this information will be helpful to you, useful to you, and relevant to what you do. I am open to Q&A if you have any questions or any comment. You can unmute, or you can go to the Q&A or the chat, whichever. And please complete the survey. We will rely on your feedback. Tell us how are we doing. And again, I had shared my email. I will share it again. If you need a specific time for us to chat, I will be more than happy to support you.
What's the actual name of the presentation again?
It is mental health and behavioral support for students with disability.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. It's in the chat, the topic and the presenter. Do you see it?
Oops. Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Sure thing, no problem. Thank you, Sally. I appreciate you. Thank you very much. Yes, Sarah, we will send you the recording and the PowerPoint and a resource sheet. And if you have any questions, reach out. No problem. Couple of minutes to let you finish the survey. Again, we thank you for your feedback. You have a good day all. It's 11:30. Thank you again for attending, and we're looking forward to seeing you in future presentations and topics. Thank you, Tiffany.